Hi, everyone. Jennifer Nicolaisen joins us today as one of the founders and executive director of SeekHealing. This is an addiction recovery organization in Asheville, North Carolina, but you'll learn more about what it's about on the show. I can tell you it is about healing from addiction by getting back to what we are all missing today, and that is connection. Thanks for joining us.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hey everybody, Kristin Sunanta Walker here. We have Jennifer Nicolaisen, and yes, I did have to ask her to say that before I could say it to you. Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Kristin.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're a new podcaster on the network. Yay!
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much.
Tell our listeners what the name of your show is.
We are the Opposite of Addiction podcast, leaving that teaser for connection and what we'll be exploring in our show.
Nice. Very nice. Which is, oh man, we have a whole section now of shows. We actually just created, listeners, so you know this too. If you ever go to our website, which is mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, you can see topics. We're not finished with it yet, but we did create a topics tree because we've got so many shows. And we have one for addiction, and it's fascinating. It was hard to kind of do that, Jennifer, which I know you understand, because so many shows talk about multiple things. Like your show is not going to just be about addiction. It's about many, many other things as well, but we have to find some way where people can go, oh, I want to see every show that mostly covers that topic or somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting to see sort of the brain of this network by looking at that topics tree, and I did turn my phone off, and that's my alarm. I have my alarm goes off at 11:11 every day with a friend of mine that's on the West Coast. And we sit back, because we're such givers. We sit back at 11:11 and we go, I gratefully receive.
Can I join you in that right now?
Yes, totally. Just take a deep, everybody, listeners too, sorry, I should have blown my nose before I did that. Let it out.
I gratefully
receive. Because, we're in the healing profession. We give and we give and we give. And sometimes we overgive. And some of us can become very martyrish about that, guilty. But we still have to remember, you got to receive from others too. So that's done every day, just to stop and take a breath. So if anybody wants to join Adam Klugman and I in doing that, set your alarms on your clock and have them go off at weird times, like in the middle of giving a speech in front of 1,000 people. I had that happen in the middle of a podcast, but it's okay.
Oh, thank you. I'm grateful for it. It's definitely a practice that would serve me to cultivate in my life as well.
Exactly. So this is the longest non-intro I've ever done. So please tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background, Jennifer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the executive director of a new nonprofit called SeekHealing. We're based in Asheville, North Carolina. A little bit about myself or the organization or both.
Talk about you first, and then we can talk about the organization.
Sure. So I am 31 years old. I live here in Asheville, North Carolina. I started the SeekHealing project coming up on 3 years ago now.
Wow, good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, we incorporated it when I was still living in the Washington, D.C. area. And after about a year of brainstorming and figuring out, well, how do you actually implement the idea that the opposite of addiction is connection? We threw around a lot of ideas in that first year after we got incorporated. But once we finally figured out, this is going to involve real humans, it's going to look like a treatment program that the world has never seen before. And we're going to have to do it in real life. We chose Asheville and moved here in 2018 to start the pilot program. So pilot program's been live for about a year.
Wow.
That's what brought me to Asheville. Before that, I was not doing anything having to do with mental or emotional health. I worked as a statistician in a consulting firm based in Washington, D.C., did a lot of work with big energy and mining companies.
Wow.
Before everything changed in my life about 3 years ago.
Why did everything change? And that because this is a big decision to go into this field, especially in addiction.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's not a short answer. Do you want the short, medium, or long?
Whatever you feel called to give, it's fine with us.
All right, sure. So let's see. Like I said, I was working as a consultant in the DC area, by all accounts and on paper, doing really well in life, getting all the gold stars. I was making a lot of money, traveling the world, getting a lot of affirmation and validation for doing good work at my job. And I was also killing myself slowly with a pretty serious bond to prescription amphetamines like Adderall, Ritalin, and Vyvanse. Smoking a lot of cigarettes, working like 80-hour weeks and only sleeping a couple hours a night kind of thing. I didn't really realize it yet, but what I would come to understand about myself is that I was living a life that was completely driven by external validation, and didn't have really much of anything inside myself to live for or drive me. And the story of how I came to understand that, I think, is the story that you're looking for, and it's what ended up taking me away from that corporate life and just living that lifestyle in the DC area to being here and doing what I'm doing now. And it happened for me through connection, through a relationship, a friendship with somebody who I love very much. We'd known each other since college, and she overdosed on heroin the summer of 2015. And it really rocked my world. It's definitely a longer story than I probably want to go into right now, but the gist of it is that we decided to partner together so she survived her overdose. Nicolaisen saved her life. And in the wake of that experience, we decided to partner together to get her well. She'd already been to rehab like 6 or 7 times. Nothing had really worked, but she was going to die if something didn't shift, something didn't change. So, like I said, long story short, but we I helped her get down to an alternative type of treatment center in Mexico that uses a process called ibogaine-assisted detox from heroin and opiate bonding or addiction. And the treatment was miraculous. It totally transformed her and her health and her perspective. But unfortunately, the treatment clinic only held her for 3 weeks or so. And after that point, it was kind of like, all right, go figure out your life.
Right, exactly. You just had this life change and unleash you back to the world. Yeah.
Right. Like there's this expectation that now you're, quote, clean, which is a word that I really hate to use. I prefer the idea of substance free. But I think what the world says is, all right, you're clean and sober now. Why don't you go back and live a normal life?
Right.
And if the detox has been, and the detox and treatment experience has been effective means transformative, which means that probably a whole lot of trauma has come up. You are totally changing everything that you think and know about the world and how you orient to reality. And it's just not quite so simple as getting started living a normal life again, whatever.
I guess what the hell is normal
anyway?
I don't live a normal life either, and I'm substance free. So who the hell knows,
Exactly. So it was really in that dearth of resources, that's total lack of any kind of support structure available to her after that treatment experience, that the idea of SeekHealing was born. And so we provide, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, a free community-based aftercare program for people who need to redefine their relationship with life after coming through any kind of mental health crisis, but specifically an addiction crisis.
I love that you just put mental health crisis ahead of addiction with what I try to say over and over again. Addiction is part of mental health.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there are so many people that go, well, I'm not going to talk on a mental health show. I'm in addiction. And I'm like, hey, you are not getting it.
Wow. Yeah, I'm a little surprised to hear that. And I guess also in this moment, grateful for this platform that you're kind of demystifying that or sending that message out there. So definitely for our listeners right now, I'll say that addiction is absolutely a fundamental part of the human experience. If you have a mind, then you have a mental health experience. If you have emotions, then you have an emotional health experience. And dealing with addictions or compulsive behaviors, even small ones like, binging Netflix or scrolling Instagram on your phone, these are all part of the ways that our brain processes our experience when we don't have our connection needs met. And that's just a fact.
And you can't see me, listeners, but I'm shaking my head up and down, up and down, up and down the whole time that she's saying this, because it's so true. I actually was watching something on YouTube that I fully admit that I have. I'm not substance free from external substances because I still do the whole YouTube thing way too much. However, I was watching Brad Pitt talk about his new movie, Ed Astra. And, he famously has gone through different kinds of rehab for alcohol and addiction and a host of other things. And he said, he just casually mentioned, it could be Netflix, it could be this, just like you mentioned. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. Mm-hmm. Totally. I have been addicted to television because that is where I was plunked. Dealing with my father, and I don't think I've ever said this on a show, but my father I saw every other weekend, and he was so abusive. I mean, sexually abusive, verbally abusive, physically abusive, all psychologically, all of those things. And my escape from dealing with him was TV and movies. That's the only time he would actually leave me alone. The only time he would leave me alone. So I was constantly manipulating him into wanting to watch TV or a movie to get away from him. And that saved me then. But then as an adult, it stopped serving its purpose because it was an anesthetizer. And people don't, we don't realize that there are other things than just, drugs and alcohol that become addictions.
Absolutely. Wow, Kristin, I really thank you and honor you for sharing that so vulnerably. It's a beautiful example of, exactly what we're talking about here, that it's not just substances. There's all kinds of things that we can get bonded to. I like the word bonding because it really gets at what we're doing.
Yes.
we're meeting a need, in that moment you had a need to have a safe connection because the relationship with your father was so unsafe. And this was something that was safe in those moments. And that's why we do that. We're rational beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It also fueled my bonding with dogs, which some people would call addiction. But that one had healthy after effects that it continues to this day. So very different than being bonded to a television set.
Yeah, but that's what we're all seeking, right? Are bonds that serve us.
That's right.
And I think with any bond that we have to evaluate like what part of this is serving me, what part is not serving me, do a little harm reduction or risk assessment if you're veering too far in any one direction.
Exactly. The 20th time I got tapeworm, we needed to take a look at.
Right.
She spends too much time with dogs.
There's everything can be almost everything I think can be taken to an extreme. I'm reminded of Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes, he's been on the show. He's wonderful.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, he's on our advisory council as well at SeekHealing, an amazing man who has inspired me so deeply. But I'm just reminded of his share about how classical music became a really dangerous and unhealthy bond for him, and which is just another like, how could you ever think that classical music could become dangerous? But
I loved
anything
it.
Can be.
It's true. I loved it because he just was the keynote at a National Council for Behavioral Health conference, and they're kind of looked at as the upper echelon of conferences in addiction and mental health, and they are wonderful. I'm not putting them down at all, but they had a conference in Vegas, and I get the business side. Look, you pick different venues for where you have conferences depending on all kinds of factors. But it was great that he comes on my show right after he did the keynote, and he's like, yeah, and I don't understand this whole putting us in the middle of a casino in Vegas where people are walking through smoke, alcohol, gambling.
For an addiction conference. That's really fascinating.
He busted them so hard. And I was like, well, they may not share this particular episode on Twitter, but that's okay. He was right.
Yeah, speak the truth. Speak the truth.
So how did you came from a completely different world, which I get because I did the whole thing that you did as well with consulting and doing really well financially. And then I turned around and put every drop of my savings into creating this network, which I can't fathom a better way to spend my earnings. But, going into this field, being an outsider coming in, not knowing the rules of the game, which mental health and addiction treatment is a business, just like anything else, and knowing the rules and how things work and what have you. Do you feel like that made it a little bit easier for you to dive into the field, or did it have its big impediments?
What a great question. So yeah, in some ways it really served me. I think because I come from a business background, that's a big part of what I bring to the organization we're building. Definitely my background serves me in building the business and creating a strategy and, team development and all of that. But my lack of a clinical background has also served me really deeply in this work. As we've been growing the project, since it's such a non-traditional approach, we've taken a lot of care to make sure that people understand we're not a medical organization. We're not staffed by therapists or caseworkers, although there are plenty of social workers and therapists who get involved with SeekHealing. The purpose of the organization is to create a place where human beings can gather and where everyone is just a human. So we don't make any distinction between volunteers and participants or patients. Everybody is a seeker in our terminology, which means that if you're seeking more connection in your life, then you get to participate in the program. And it allows for really beautiful connections to be formed where people don't feel like, oh, this is a therapist who's the only reason they're even relating or interacting with me is because I'm sick and they need to fix me and make me better. It's like we're all coming together because we all need connection and it flows in both directions. And just really eliminating that sense of otherness. So since I don't have a clinical background, and since I kind of just bullheaded my way into all of this based on intuition and what I had learned from my own experience, I love that. It served me very well. And now I'll say that we have surrounded ourselves as we've grown with a lot of people who are well credentialed and who have really brilliant insights about this stuff, like Dr. Mate. We have a couple folks on our board who are affiliated with medication-assisted recovery facilities and things like that. So, but yeah, I would say the answer to your question is that it's actually really helped me to have a different perspective on mental and emotional health, that coming from more of this human perspective. And the feedback that I get from clinical professionals, the more I dive into this world, is that this is exactly what's needed. And more clinicians asking for us to bring our training into their facilities so that they can improve attending skills.
We want to do that with you guys too. I know I talked to you about Digital Tech Initiative and what we're doing there about being overly connected to our devices and to social media and things like that. And we are creating our own curriculums for things, but all of us have said people have done it better and already. So, as soon as I don't even know how I heard about you. I don't remember how we connected.
I don't remember either.
But somehow we did. It's a spiritual thing. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter. That's right. Exactly. Because as soon as I read about what you're doing, I was like, okay, so I don't know what's going to happen with Digital Tech Initiative. I don't have like a 5-year plan for that. I already run 2 other companies, but I know that it's needed. And for whatever reason, we get picked to do talks, even though I don't necessarily think that we're always the best speaker, but we do get picked. So it's important when called to show up. So we go do those things. And what I feel like we can add to it is, okay, you guys have a curriculum. It's so in line with what we're trying to do with this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can just go, here you go. And I didn't tell you about this, which I'm announcing to listeners too, is, you know, I've got 8 years of interviewing incredible people, from non-clinicians to clinicians to anywhere in between. And so me being able to put together a retreat or a conference or a summit is really easy, because I can just hand pluck from all the guests I've ever had over all these years. But we're putting together healing retreats that are about disconnecting from your devices.
Oh, awesome.
And I didn't share that with you. And a friend of mine who I go to, who's a shaman, she wants to do them in Asheville. We just figured this out yesterday, Jennifer. So
this is perfect.
Breaking news. And we were going to do them in Virginia, and people were going to stay in yurts down the road from my property. And then we were like, yeah, but we don't want to deal with food and all the other details. Why don't we find a retreat that already exists? They'll take care of all that stuff that's important. So we don't have to. We can just bring in the experts. And my friend Martha said, well, let's do this in Asheville. And so I'm sitting here talking to you today, the day after, going, oh, well, of course we need to do it in Asheville, because I need to talk to Jennifer about that. She needs to be part of that, because they can come to it, and then they can have the aftercare. Because that was the thing. I promise I'll be quiet after this, but I lived on a commune for a while, and I was there to, I was trading out my living costs with helping them market what they do. And they do interesting things, all spiritual, no clinical. But the thing that I found tremendously painful, and why I finally left, was that you would do all this deep processing and spiritual work, and it was beautiful. But there was nobody there that knew how to close that openness. Like, they created all this opening for you over a week, a weekend, a month. And then you're free out into the world. There was nobody there that knew how to go, okay, let's transition back to, like you're talking about with your friend leaving treatment. You have to know how to help people close those chakras, or whatever you want to say it is, so that they can then go be in the world again. Because a lot of people would leave this place and end up in a mental hospital. And so what I want to do with these retreats is, I want to open people up, no technology, be there, have this incredible experience, whatever is meant to be, with incredible people that totally care, and close up and go back out into the world.
Wow, Kristin, this is really great. I didn't realize that was what you were trying to accomplish with the healing retreats. I mean, yeah, SeekHealing would be a great next step after something like that. It's that integration piece that you're talking about that's so critical. I mean, it makes sense that once we open our hearts and our beings to connectedness and do that deep healing work, that coming back into this world doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
And we're like, oh my gosh, we're in this crazy messed up system that I don't really want to plug into, but I'm here anyway. And now I have all this spiritual insight, right? And I need to keep a roof over my head and food in my mouth.
Yep.
Yeah. That's exactly
that's what you guys offer. And the fact that we're doing it, yes, we're going to have people that are going to fly in, but you've talked about, well, there'll be other ways that people could connect that aren't necessarily have to be local. But it's so, isn't it cool, Jennifer? Yeah. Isn't it cool how this stuff happens? And
it's amazing.
When you live your life in a state, it's scary. It's scary to live your life in a state of, the next right thing is coming. Just trust that it is coming. Because you don't know that it actually is.
But it inevitably does.
It does. Just had this conversation yesterday, was sitting there going, why did I even say we would do these retreats? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to close up that loop. Am I being ridiculous? This isn't about money. Clearly, we all just want to, have our travel paid. Like, what on earth? And then here we do this show today, which you've had to cancel several times because you're slammed. Yes. I've had to cancel. And then today, boom. And here it is, you're in Asheville. So it's amazing how that kind of stuff happens. And when we are so disconnected, it doesn't leave room for these kind of things to happen,
Yeah, that's exactly right. It takes us out of flow. But when we're in flow like this and just trusting, it's amazing to me that ever since that experience that I went through 3 years ago, I'm just living my life in this way. And it's like, well, okay, I'm just going to trust.
And it doesn't mean that trust journey isn't fraught with anxiety.
Oh yeah. Hell no. There is plenty of that to go around.
Face plants, embarrassment. Yeah. There's a lot of whoo. And then there's also, oh my God, that was so stupid. Everybody is realizing that I don't know what I'm doing and I should be given no keys to any kingdom and there's all that stuff that still comes with it. It's just, I think a lot of the connecting is kind of the meat of connection is feeling those things because that's real.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference is that we're both choosing to live our lives now in a way where we really feel the full arc of every emotional experience that we have rather than reaching to TV or for me to, amphetamines to numb that feeling, which is, what living in this world kind of conditions us to do, that we're only supposed to feel happy feelings or we're only useful to each other when we're in a happy state.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah. Yeah. Because we're on this crest of law of attraction stuff, which I'm not downing that at all. It has everything, not everything, but many things have their juice in it. That's good. But that addiction to
positivity,
positive. Hello. That is not what the human experience is about. Sometimes, and most of the time it actually sucks. But that's the contrast you need to enjoy those highs that are always going to come.
Yep. It is a weird thing being a human being. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think the most we can do is just kind of be with each other, and it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Totally. You know what I noticed the other day, and I'd love your commentary on it because I know that you'll see it from that 100,000 foot view, but I was talking to my friend Raj. She's a wonderful psychotherapist and she does yoga and meditation and she's a beautiful person. Met her through a not great experience, which often happens, and really bonded. And she's going to be doing these retreats with us. And she and I were talking, we were face to face in front of each other at a coffee shop and just having this intense, amazing conversation, the conversations that you live for, right? Those just, and I had to show her something that was on my phone because it was part of what we were talking about. And I felt it. I'm so in tune now that I felt that out of the personal connection and into this thing that is a barrier. And it took me a minute to get back in the flow. And I never got fully back into the flow of the connection we had once I grabbed my phone and showed her this thing. And I'm glad that moment happened because when I got in my car and I thought about it, I went, oh, that's why we want to do these retreats so that we can just really, I don't think people understand it until they've experienced what it is to go in and then be sucked out of it. And then you can't get back in as easily, if ever, for that moment that you just were. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What a powerful insight, Kristin. I'm grateful to you for sharing that. And just really grateful in this moment that you're thinking about that and talking about this. It's so important. I think that people do experience that flow, that you're talking about, but we don't name it in any particular way in our world. We're just like, oh yeah, they're a really good friend, or that was really great. And kind of move on and miss this opportunity to understand that there's something really powerful that's happening when we connect with each other in that way. And starting to look at the mechanics of how it works is critical. That's maybe the best way to sum up what we do in our listening training is we look at the mechanics of what it feels like to be in that flow and to come out of it and to start to track in your own mind what you do. Because every human's a little bit different as far as how they drop into that, what their particular trauma is that blocks them from accessing different parts of it. And so what's needed is for all of us to start looking at what does it feel like when I, am feeling really connected to you, and what am I doing in my process and my mind and my heart that helps me feel more connected or less connected. And yeah, absolutely. Any kind of distraction will take you out of that, which isn't to say that the phone is evil. It's just to note that, you broke a very clear energetic flow that was happening. And you can do it in other ways too. I mean, it can happen also, if that conversation wasn't so awesome and charged and you were struggling a little bit to communicate authentically, there might have been other things that interrupted, like,
A
you know,
server or
yeah,
maybe
or
want
even
some more
something that,
ketchup or
or maybe what about one of you giving the other one advice, or stopping really listening to what the other person was saying and starting to instead plan what you're going to say next and drop into like the space of like, oh, I hope she thinks or looks at me in this way, so I better make sure I say this a certain way. That also interrupts that flow. But the phone does it in a very big, like,
It really does. Yeah. It's kind of cool too. Like when I was talking with all these students up in Michigan about, I asked everybody to raise their hand if any of them worked with horses, and I shouldn't have done that because that was my whole point of the story, was to talk about this thing with horses, and nobody raised their hand. And I'm like, oh, that was a dumb thing to do, because now I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. And they just told me that nobody works with horses. But I went ahead anyway with, you see people now when they're out with their horse, and the whole point of being with a horse, if you're wanting to be more connected, is to really just be with that animal. That's what they're there for. Like on supercharge is connecting. Their ears turn to you. Everything is about this thing we're talking about. And I see so many people now, 25 and younger, that are with their horses, because I'm around more horse people, and they're on their phone when they're on their horse, or they're on their phone when they're doing an exercise with a horse. And I'm like, oh my God, it's painful to watch, because I see this horse like running in a circle around somebody, and the horse is like, I'm waiting for this connection, thousands of years of human horse connection. Wow. What's going on? And someone's on their phone, and it breaks my heart every single time.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Anyway, I've talked way too much on this show.
Oh, no, you're great. I'm loving this connection.
So tell, because what you do with SeekHealing is so different. It's so back to a primitive way that we used to connect. It's fascinating to me. I mean, it's ahead of its time, and then it's also like, let's go back to what we know worked. How are you finding navigating this as a business listen, I know the behind the scenes of the addiction treatment world, especially, it can be cutthroat. So how are you sort of navigating this space and doing what you do?
Well, it's, as far as navigating being in the recovery world and the recovery industry, it seems like we're just kind of slipping right in a beautiful, good, complementary way. We're a nonprofit, so we're not in a competitive space with treatment centers. In fact, we exist to support people as they're leaving treatment. So that works really well, and it fuels really supportive and partnership building conversations with clinicians and treatment providers. The one place where there is a little bit of interesting resistance that I'm really fascinated by and trying to bring to light to talk about more often is that we are not an abstinence-based program when it comes to the substances people are using or not using. Because again, something that blocks that experience of connection is shaming a person or telling a person that they should be, doing less of that and whatever it is, like, well, you shouldn't be doing heroin, but you should be on methadone or Suboxone, or you shouldn't be on methadone or Suboxone because that means you're not clean, or you should only watch 1 hour of TV a day instead of 2, or, that we make up all these silly rules, when really what's more important is that the person is moving through their process and their experience and choosing what's going to serve them or not serve them in any given moment. And the truth is that addiction is like an onion, and you peel back one layer just to find another one, and something else that you don't have a healthy relationship with. So we are really indiscriminate about that. Anybody is welcome to attend our circles and our meetings and our groups, regardless of what they're using or not using. So that's created some interesting conversations with the traditional establishment of addiction treatment and recovery. And, there are important safety concerns to keep in mind there. But as long as you're keeping safety in mind, and for example, all of our meetings are staffed by at least one volunteer space owl. we call the role. And the space owl is there specifically to hold space one-on-one with anybody who needs it in the meeting. So that particularly applies if somebody does show up intoxicated to the point where they are going to distract the rest of the meeting.
Right.
We don't want to turn them away and say, you're not welcome here, because it's the last thing anybody struggling with active addiction needs.
Oh my gosh.
We want to just step aside and give them what they need, which is probably some one-on-one talking and getting a chance to connect and be heard and be seen. So yeah, I guess that's probably the stickiest point. But otherwise, it seems like we just kind of slip into a gap.
Nice.
Addiction and mental health treatment for years now has identified that there's this biopsychosocial spectrum view of mental health, right? And we have great infrastructure for the biological part, lots of detox options and medications, awesome infrastructure for the psychological part with, beautiful and increasingly rich modalities for psychotherapy becoming available, but not a whole lot, if any, infrastructure for addressing the social needs that people have. So we're just kind of showing up in that space.
I love it. Love it. Makes me want to get my butt back to the Asheville area as soon as possible, which I will at some point.
It sounds like you will. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm keep being nudged back in that direction. So, well, your show is called
The Opposite of Addiction.
Right, which we all know is connection. And the organization, tell our listeners where they can find out more about your organization.
Sure, you can go online to our website, www.seekhealing.org, SEEK healing.org. Plenty of information on there. You can find, if you're local to Asheville, you can find our program calendar and just come join us at a meeting. If you're not local to Asheville, there's plenty of other ways to get involved. You can find that on our website. Just reach out and shoot one of us an email. We'll get back in touch with you. We're getting a lot of requests right now to bring SeekHealing elsewhere in the nation. And we're working on that, but it is going to take some time as we get our feet underneath us and figure out our funding. Yeah, that's the biggest one. I'm still not getting paid. So as soon as I can get my staff paid and we get, things rolling in a way that makes sense, we'll be able to grow outwards, which I'm looking forward to.
I totally get it. I just thought yesterday, I just was looking at the network website and I was like, most days or hours or minutes, I'm like, yeah, I've done a lot, with like a budget of 0. And then other days I'm like, oh man, I'm sure somebody looks at all that we do with the network and sees every dust bunny in the corner and what we should be doing. And I'm like, hey, I'm doing the best I can with
Exactly. Doing the best we can with what we have.
Exactly. Well, I know you need to get going because you've got a busy center to run. So thank you so much for being on the network and for also coming on to do a show.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kristin, for having me for this conversation and connection. And I'm looking forward to everything.
Awesome. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive-aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial.